So in this video I want to show you what's involved in coding, what to pay attention to, how to name the codes, what's the overall reasoning and logic behind this process. I know that resources are limited when it comes to coding, especially such first-hand experiences. So that's what I'm hoping to show you. Now, quickly before we start, two things to explain and to understand about what's happening. So I'm using NVivo. You don't have to use the software. This is just to show you the overall process of coding, like I said, whether you're doing manually or using any other software. This video will still be relevant. I'm, however, using NVivo. Those of you who follow me know that I usually use this software, and I strongly encourage people to use this software. And the video itself, the data set itself, it comes from my online self-study course on how to use NVivo for data analysis. Now, if you're following me and you just noticed that I uploaded a new video, this means the course is still not finished. But if you found me on YouTube, so you're in the future from now, so to speak, chances are the course has already been published. So just check the links under the video to see the full course in which I take you through the whole process of how to analyze your data, how to conduct your study using NVivo. And regarding the content of the video itself, so again, in this video I'm only focusing on the process of coding. I'm not reviewing the whole process of qualitative data analysis, which is something I have done in my previous videos. So have a look at this video, for example, where I summarized the whole process of qualitative data analysis. This video is only focusing on coding, and it's the first part of a three-part series of how to do coding and thematic analysis. So in the second one, I'll be using the same codes I create today. I'll be moving them around and showing what happens in the second stage of creating so-called focus codes. And in the final video, I'll show you what to do next and how to turn these focus codes into themes. Again, if you are from the future, so you found me on YouTube, just have a look at the other links because they will be ready. If you just notice me uploading this video, it means you have to wait 2 more weeks, because I'll be uploading these part 2 and 3 respectively in a week's time and in 2 weeks' time. So let's start our process now. As I said, I'm in NVivo. I'm using this practice data set. It consists of chefs and actors. And today I'll code one of these actors and perhaps start the second one. Now, what are we trying to do first? So what is our study? Our hypothetical study wants to find out about factors that potentially have an influence on job retention among chefs and actors. So we want to find out what happens, why would they decide to stay in the job or leave the job. So generally, what are the factors that may contribute to this decision? This is not primary data, which means, of course, it's more challenging. This means we haven't asked these chefs and actors specifically these questions. So what factors influence your decision to stay in the job or leave the job? But rather, this is secondary data, which means it's been collected for different purposes by different people. So I only took these interview transcripts, and now I'm gonna try to find out from these transcripts what are the factors I mentioned. However, although we have these questions, these research questions in our study, as you'll see in a second, as I'll show you, it doesn't really matter to me at this point. At the moment, it doesn't matter what the research questions are, because I'm still going to just code everything as much as I can with in as much detail as possible. The research questions will only really become relevant at the stage where I'm trying to think of my themes, therefore how to answer the research questions. Initially, I'm just trying to be as objective as possible, although it's challenging to be objective, and as detailed as possible. And this is something I always advise to my students when I explain how to do coding. You should just try to code as much as possible, because at this point, initially, you're not in a position to decide what's really relevant or what's not relevant, because something that doesn't look relevant may become so later as you go through your third or fourth or fifth transcript. So we'll be detailed in our coding. So let's just start to code this data. As I said, this is NVivo. I'm just going to select the option to highlight all coding as I'm creating it, and we'll start to read. So the first question was the most fun thing you've ever had making a movie. Now, I'm not going to code this as the most fun when making a movie. I've said it many times in my videos. If you've watched me before, it's not a great code if it's so general and it's not really telling me about its content. Instead, I'm going to code the actual response and see what he says. So for example, here he says, but you guys, you're going to die. What are you doing? You're going to catch a wild snake, whatever. So basically he's talking about those are great times. He's saying the most fun was when there was danger. So that's what I'm gonna do. The most fun fun was when there was danger. You can see the first thing that you're noticing is the name of the code. It's quite long, it's quite descriptive, it's not inclusive, it's not something generic and something abstract. I'm literally describing what he said. The most fun was when there was danger. It's a kind of a clumsy name as well, but this is because, as I always say, codes will be my little notes, my notes to myself later. So if you're familiar with NVivo, you know that if I double click on a code later, it takes me just to the section I coded. So codes are my insight into my data. And another thing I often say is that they are like my table of contents. I will be adding more codes and I want them to be clear. I want them to be telling me what this piece was about. If I just coded the whole response and said, and then named the code, what's the most fun you ever had when making a movie, it's okay. I know this code has the answer to this question, but I want this code to actually give me the answer. The name of it should be clear. So I'm just making it easier to myself for later. When I'm exploring my list of codes, I want it to be easier for me to see what the data was about. So I want these names to actually speak for themselves. Something happened with my light. The light is back on. So let's continue. So these are great times when there was danger. The most fun was when there was danger, crazy helicopter pilots. I enjoy these moments. Again, I'm just gonna code this probably as the same code. The most fun was when there was danger. Okay, so now is it danger that appeals to you? Let's see what he says here. I like it when you can make it a little bit more extreme. So I guess it's still the same. It's about this danger. So I'm just using, again, if you're familiar with NVivo, I'm just using the same code. I'm just coding it. You can see I've used it 3 times already. And now I have found that movies are actually disappointingly sterile environments. So he doesn't like it when they are sterile. So let's see. Sterile environments are not good. That's all I'll say. It really doesn't matter. I've said that many times to my students. It really doesn't matter that much what you call these codes, as long as they make sense to you. As long as they make sense to you. Later, when you're thinking of themes, that's something you will be. That's when I will be more worried about the name. I want them to sound good, to be clear to my readers, and so on and so forth. For now, they are, remember, my notes to myself. As long as they make sense to me and they are clear and they are telling me what this extract is about, it means they are good. So the next sentence, the more you get away from the studio, the better. The further from the location. So yeah, so I'll just select this. Again, I may literally say the same thing. The more you get out, the better. I'll probably code it also as sterile environments are not good, because it's kind of a continuation of that thought. So again, this shows us that, and I always say it, the more codes there are, the better. So it's really not a problem if you have too many codes. It's really not a problem if you're using several codes to code the same sentence. It's only a problem if you don't have enough code. So I always want to make sure that there are many codes and I have something to work on, to choose from. Okay, let's see. You're on a mission, adventure, you're on adventure, sense of adventure. I can just leave it like that, but actually I'll say sense of adventure, a good thing. Again, remember why later when I explore this list, I want to be able to see from the list, it's my table of contents. Remember, I want to be able to see what that data is about. So I want it to be as clear as possible. If I just say adventure, sense of adventure, maybe I'll forget what about that adventure. Was it a good thing, for example, or a bad thing? Here I said it's a good thing. Again, dangerous, nice, dangerous situations. So sense of adventure, and also it's about the danger. Let's see what else. Whether they're dangerous mentally or physically, I'll enjoy that. So again, I'll code this, I'll use the same code, but then also I'll call it mental and physical danger, probably, or stimulation. I was thinking of a word stimulation, but let's just call it danger, because that's what he said. I don't want to be really putting words in his mouth. So let's say that's what I'll call it. I'd get bored if I didn't have this prospect. Get to work with people who are like-minded, who really want to push it. So I'll say here, I'll say good to work with like-minded people. And also, if I didn't have, I get bored if I didn't have the prospect of knowing. Well, it is boring when, what is he saying? It's boring when, I guess it's boring when it's not dangerous. It's not dangerous. Because he's saying working with like-minded people, but essentially he's talking about like people who really want to push it. So yeah. Oh yeah, and really want to push it. So pushing boundaries. As you've noticed, this bit here is pretty packed with information, or packed with codes as a result. So I've used several codes for several sentences. Some of the sentences have been coded with more than one code. Again, just because I don't want to miss anything. I'm not sure what's gonna happen later, and I'm not sure what kind of content I'll find, what is relevant, what is not relevant. So if, for example, pushing boundaries is specifically something that somebody else mentions at some point, I want to be able to see that, to recognize that I've already done that I've already seen that somewhere. I can just call the whole thing something like, stimulation or adventure or danger, which is fine. But if somebody specifically talks about one of these things that I have here, like like-minded people, pushing boundaries, as I said, I want to be able to recognize that straight away. I want to be able to see that connection, because that's how later you start thinking of some patterns and trends running through your data, and as a result, you started to think about the themes. So that's why I always try to be that detailed whenever I can, of course. So now let's continue. Now he's talking about smaller films as opposed to bigger films, blockbuster films. So he says with the bigger movies you have hesitation, there are so many people involved. I'll say not good when too many people involved. Now with a smaller movie you have less people being nervous about investments, so less people are trying to steer the movie in a certain way. So again, less people, better. But why is it better? Because they have more autonomy, they have more control. So autonomy and control are a good thing. So I'm kind of interpreting some of this stuff, as you can see, but also again trying to make it easier for myself perhaps. Here it just says less people better, which is fine, but then again I'll probably have to explore at some point and try to understand why was it, because at some point I will have to make a decision whether it's in fact relevant to what I'm trying to do in our study. There are some more things that he says. I'm not sure I understand exactly what he means. I feel that bigger movies you have to sit back and assess it more, so maybe just more hesitation and planning with bigger movies. Probably something he doesn't like. I think all of it, actually. I'll just select all of it, and it will be about that autonomy and control, because that's essentially the point. I feel that with smaller movies there's just you have I guess more scope for creating, for actually creating, following your passion. And bigger movies, there are probably just more control, more restrictions, things like that. So yeah, so you don't have all this nonsense of people calling you a movie star. He doesn't like it, so doesn't like being called a movie star. Start. I can change it. And what else? He wants to be he wants to be passionate, and real about his role. Kind of. At some point I'll assess this. So again, I'm not trying to really interpret things or assume things, but it's kind of what he's saying. So basically he doesn't feel like a movie star. He wants to follow his passion and just be real and just really enjoy acting. So now, what is it that he's saying? Okay, well, he's not in a movie because he wants to be center of attention. He doesn't like to be in center of attention. Funny that he's an actor, so not much you can do, I guess. But what he means is that low key in life. So again, he's just low key. Wants to act because it's his passion, something like that. These are almost my thoughts at the moment. Just again, I'm going to revisit and review it and make sure that I'm not making assumptions. But it's kind of what I'm almost brainstorming as I'm coding and thinking of what I see here. So let's see. All right. Well, yeah. Generally, I'll select all of it. Saying doesn't like to be. I kind of have it called a movie star. Well, doesn't like being famous movie star. I'll probably I'll review it for sure, but I don't have time for that at the moment. So again, I'm just creating codes. That's my main goal. I want to have lots of codes, remember. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just being detailed. What makes you do the big movies? I like the emotion. Okay, likes the emotion. Likes the emotion. That's what we need to know. Likes the emotion. I very much enjoy trying to put myself in other people's shoes. So putting yourself in another person's shoes, a good thing. Again, it's just my note. So that's how it goes. I'm not sure about this stuff in between. So growing up, different people. Again, likes putting himself in other people's shoes. I do that all the time. Fascination. That's what I'll call it. It's not the best code, but sometimes I do this too. Why is it not the best code? Remember what I said initially. Because it just says it's a general concept. Fascination. You can see how different it is from example from this. Putting yourself in another person's shoes, a good thing. This one is explaining everything about what I coded. This one's just saying there is something about fascination. I really don't know what it is, so I have to review this code. I'll have to open it, read it, and decide. But sometimes I just do it just to move on, because I also don't want to spend too much time just looking at each sentence. So all of it is also about growing up and developing interest in acting. Rather quite a general code again, but since I know I have also coded these elements, these specific different sentences in that paragraph, then I'm fine. I just don't want to rely on such big codes. Usually I will at some point open it, I'll read the whole thing, and I probably will code individual sentences anyway, because you can do it in Vivo. You can code from this extract directly. And why this happens is because I may simply have more ideas, I may be quicker in thinking on that day, so I'll still review it. There is nothing in this that I will not review. At some point I'll be reading every single code, I'll be reading every single extract for all these codes before I decide what to do with them next. So I believe that by now you're getting a pretty good idea of where this is going and how this is happening. I will not be coding the full interview or the next one. As I said, it does take a little bit more time than I thought, but I'm hoping, and I don't think that you would be willing to watch me do another full interview, but hopefully you begin to understand the point or the logic of how I'm coding. The most important message, I would say, and this is something I always say to people in our one-to-one tutorials when we're looking at their coding, at their data, and trying to help, because that's, by the way, something I do a lot. So just have a look at my website, quick ad here. I offer all kinds of services and private sessions. When we do, the most important thing that I usually try to communicate, and this is, and I consider it a success when people tell me that they feel so much better and more confident now, is that codes are your tools. They are your tools. Nobody can really and shouldn't really interfere in that process, because they are your little units and tools for understanding your data. Later, when you have your themes, for example, it's different, because then you're creating something that will be for a broader, wider audience. At the moment, you're only trying to make sense of your data. So as you've noticed me doing, it's almost as if they are my notes to myself, these codes. I'm just making sure that I don't forget things. I'm sometimes trying to interpret slightly something, although I'm being very careful with that, of course. But this is how you create the codes. So sometimes I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong, but I guess I'm compensating for that by just creating more codes when I'm not sure. So to make sure that it's almost like validation when later I'll be reading these sentences again and deciding if I was right in what I called it. So there is never the right way to code or the right way to name a code. It's just, again, it's you, and it's always going to be, in qualitative research, your subjectivity and all that. But don't worry about that, and don't be afraid to do that, because it's just a natural element. That subjectivity is always going to be present in the process. So what I'll do next, I'll just continue to code this data. I'll continue to code this interview, and I'll code these remaining interviews here. So other actors and chefs. And in the next video, I'll share what happens next with these initial codes, and how I work on these codes, and how I move them around and organize them. So again, wait till I post the next video, or if you found this video on YouTube, then it means the other one is ready by now. And feel free to explore the course that I mentioned, in which you can take all the time you want. You can retake it as many times as you want, so you have access to this great library of resources, and I take you through the whole process of doing research using NVivo, so the software I've been using in this video.